Kia ora everyone, my name's Rebekah, just in case you don't know me, though you probably do, and just a little bit about what I'm up to right now in my life, in my world. I run both the youth group programs here, so we've got our intermediates and our seniors, and just on that note, we've got a really exciting youth group dinner coming up. It's the 13th of September, and I really encourage you to RSVP, come along. It's a $20 koha. It'll be going to a charity the young people choose, and it's just going to be a really great time. Alongside youth group, I'm also a university student. I'm in my honours year of psychology, and my kind of specific interest is hearing parents' experiences of learning New Zealand Sign Language. So you might notice a wee bit of signing / gesturing during this. I got told this week that I have an Italian or above Italian level of hand movement, and I didn't know if that was a compliment, but I'm carrying on. This month we're in Giving Month, and so we're focusing about giving, what that means, and today specifically we're looking at giving in deed or in service or in kind of the action doing side of giving. And I thought I'd start with something that's been coming up this week in university. In all my courses we have somehow managed to hit the idea of mind-body dualism. Now if you're not familiar with it, that's okay. My world, not yours. And basically mind-body dualism is this idea that our minds are separate from our bodies and that they can be inherently separated. A quite nice way, I guess, to imagine this is if you know the film Inside Out, especially, I haven't actually seen the second one, heard good things, haven't seen it. But in the first film, you see this little girl and in her head she's got these like emotions that like run around and they're like in the control center and they're like organizing everything and trying to cope with everything that's coming in. It's a little bit crazy, but her mind is separate from her body. And that's what mind-body dualism is. It's actually just such an interesting debate because that's kind of been the historical perspective on a lot of things, but there's been this real shift in recent times away from mind-body dualism, saying it doesn't actually capture the human experience very well. You can't actually separate our minds from our bodies, they're interconnected, and it kind of sits on a spectrum. So you've got the people down here who are like, your mind and your body are separate. You can't, they're different things. And then you've got the other end, which is like your mind and your body, they're the same thing. They're inseparable. Don't even try. And then, you know, there's kind of a spectrum of the people in the middle who are like, it's kind of both. And it's just, I think, a really interesting discussion, and you'll probably work out where I sit somewhere on the spectrum as I go through this talk today. Our reading today is from James chapter 2. It's nice and short. It's verses 14 to 18, and it goes like this. Faith and deeds. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such a faith save them? Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes or daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, not accompanied with action, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. So, this reading at its core, I think, has a pretty clear message. Our faith cannot be without our deeds. Actually, the New Zealand Sign Language sign for faith is quite nice. It starts at your head and it goes to your heart, because your faith is not just in your head. It's not just in our heads. And I think we see this really interesting idea in the passage about being saved. Can such a faith save you? Because when we have been saved by Christ, when we've been saved by God, it's not just our minds that are saved. We are saved in our entirety. From our mind to our fingertips all the way down to our toes. We are saved. It changes us to our very core, and in the gospel and in the Bible we often see this described as being born again. That's how profoundly changed we are. And I think in our world, especially in Western society, there's a really real risk of over-rationalizing. You know, our world is full of thinking and rationalizing and critiquing. And I think we can reduce our faith to those things. Thinking, rationalizing. I think we begin to think our faith is about how we intellectually understand God and the Bible, and that theology becomes our faith. It's all in our heads. Recently, I caught up with a friend and we were chatting and we were debating, and it was a great debate. You know, we're talking about theology and we were discussing perspectives on it, and there was some really great kind of thought experiments. Well, if this is true, then this, then this, then this, and this. Like really interesting stuff. But I walked away from the conversation and there was something in me that was like, oh, that conversation wasn't right, Rebekah. And I was sitting there and I was reflecting, I was like, why does this conversation make me feel so uncomfortable? Why, you know, like I debate things all the time. And I kind of came to this realization that in our conversation, we had reduced God to a thought. We had somehow missed a God who saved us, a Jesus who died on the cross for us, and God had become this thought worthy of debate, but that's kind of it. God was in our heads, nowhere else. Because at the core of my faith, or at the core of anyone's faith, I realized it's not a critique or an intellectualization on who God is. It's the fact that God has already done everything God needs to do to save me. At the core of my faith is what God has already done. And in what God has already done, I am changed. And this changing isn't limited to my head. That doesn't make sense. This change flows out of whatever's in my head, whatever's in my body. It flows out, and it flows out into my doing. For it not to do so is like building a dam, but that's not possible. It flows out. That's how profound the change is. From verse 15 to 17, we're provided with an example of need. We're introduced to this character, and they are hungry, and they don't have clothes, so presumably they're cold. And in the face of this very real need, someone meets it with words, with lovely, well-intended, presumably, sentences. Oh man, go in peace. Be warm and well-fed. You know, like I really wish and I pray for these things for you, but this was a very real need. And James says that if this is what your faith looks like, your faith is dead, which is, whew, a bit heavy there, James. And I think what James is really getting at is in the face of someone who knows a living God, when you see that need, how could you meet that with words? It's unfathomable, because if we have been truly changed, we see this person doesn't need words. They need action. It's unfathomable, and it becomes unfathomable because how can we, people changed by a Jesus who sacrificed everything, not do something? Our faith flows out into our actions. And I think it's important to note that in these actions, there will be sacrifice. Doing something comes at a cost, and that's not something to be shied away. Jesus died on the cross in his service. We see many other people martyred in the Bible. My favourite Bible verse is Isaiah chapter 52, verse 7, and it goes like this. How beautiful on the mountain are the feet of those who bring good news. This verse is actually referenced later in Romans by Paul to talk about the sharing of the gospel. And to me, this verse has a deep and underlying humour to it, because feet that have trekked up a mountain, not beautiful. It's kind of inherent in the whole trekking part, gross, sweaty, maybe blistered, dirty. And to me, that is like serving. Serving gets a bit messy, gets a bit dirty, it's hard, it goes wrong. But somehow in that, it is beautiful, and that is the promise of it. Because the point of serving isn't that it is easy or that it'll be done perfectly, but the point when we serve is that we do it in faith. I do want to chuck a little disclaimer here. I'm not saying you shouldn't go get upskilled or learn better ways to serve, so hold that nuance. What I'm saying is that when we serve, we can't just serve with the expectation that it'll be perfect. or that it'll be easy. We serve because our faiths call us to serve, and we serve stepping out of faith. I think sometimes when we're called to serve, it feels like you stand at the foot of a mountain and you're looking up. And you're like, how on earth am I ever going to get up there? How on earth am I ever going to do any meaningful serving? Because we will fail, we will do serving wrong, it'll be hard, and we might never see the fruits of that service. So just as our faith must have deeds, our deeds must also be led in faith. Because when we stand at the foot of the mountain not knowing what to do, we step out in faith, trusting that God will meet us there. And I can personally, share stories of what it looks like to stand at those mountains, looking up. There have been many situations in my life, especially in my youth group service, where I've stood at the foot of that mountain and I've been like, what am I doing here? What does it look like to serve here? This is impossible, and all I'm going to do is make a mess of it, or it's going to fall apart, or it's already falling apart and I'm just looking at a burning heap of something. But there's goodness in stepping forward in faith to serve. So we know that our faith leads to service, and that service will come at a cost. But somewhere in that cost there is a deep, deep goodness and a deep, deep beauty. I guess the final question is, where do we serve? You see, I have a bit of an issue. I have a tendency to stick my finger in as many pies as possible, over-sign myself up for things, and kind of really sit on the boundary of what is humanly possible to do. But that's okay. I'm working on it. We're all works in progress, and that is something I work on. Because what I struggle with is knowing where to serve. I look out to the world, and in my faith, I know the great hope of Jesus, and I see so many places that haven't seen that realized. And I feel called to act, but also where to act. Oh my gosh, there's so many places. Because I am one person, and I don't have all the world needs. Luckily, I don't have to have everything the world needs, because I'm not the only one called to serve. This call to serve is a collective call. We're called to serve, to bring heaven a little bit closer to earth, to see that hope of Jesus a little bit more realized. And I think the realization I have come to is that I'm called to serve the things God puts in front of me to serve. Because I guarantee you, God is putting something in front of you to serve. And you may not see it yet, but there will be something. Because I know there are many things in my life that get put in front of me to serve. And often I think there are numerous things, and they're small or they're big. They can be as small as you walk down the street and you see that piece of rubbish and you know God's creation deserves better than that. Or it can be as big as, here's a youth group. Go run it. We're called to serve. I think for me, a really easy example is maybe when we see someone at church and we see them standing by themselves and we know that's not what God wants for them. God doesn't want us to be alone in a space of connection. And we're called to go maybe talk to them, to make them feel welcomed. God is calling us to serve. Our faiths call us to serve. It doesn't make sense to split our faith into our minds and to our bodies. Our whole bodies, our whole embodiment has been saved. We are called to serve. But in the space of some pretty big and terrifying, ominous looking mountains that we're called to serve on, and maybe you're standing there at the foot of them right now. I know I certainly have a few. And you're wondering, what on earth are you doing here? How did you get yourself into this situation? Often I'm like, God, what is this? Know that you do not stand at the foot of that mountain alone. God is with you in your faith, and so is everyone else, and so are we. Because those feet, as they trek up the mountain, they will be messy and they will be dirty, but oh, how beautiful they will be. So I leave you with a few questions. Has your faith become trapped in your head? Where are you stepping out in faith to serve? What's the mountain in front of you right now? And where might God be calling you to serve this week?